Hello and welcome. This is Beate Chelette. In my episode of the Business Growth Architect Show, we're going to talk about how to elevate business with spiritual strategy. So we're going to really dive in. How does spirituality actually connect to strategic success? How can you use spirituality in a strategic form that it actually creates that kind of success that you always dreamt of? We also talk a little bit about branding, positioning, and what happens when you make serious changes in life and when what you are doing right now is no longer working. How do you get sort of into that next level, which is why we need spirituality and strategy. Listen to the episode right now. And hello, fabulous person. Beate Chelette here. I am the host of the Business Growth Architect Show, and I want to welcome you to today's episode where we discuss how to navigate strategy and spirituality to achieve time and financial freedom. Truly successful people have learned how to master both: a clear intention and a strategy to execute that in a spiritual practice that will help them to stay in alignment and on purpose. Please enjoy the show and listen to what our guest today has to say about this very topic. Hello, fabulous people. Beate Chelette here, the Growth Architect. Welcome to an episode of the Business Growth Architect Show. And today I want to talk to you about a concept I've been pondering over, and that is badass grandma. And we talk about elevate business with spiritual strategy. So the point of today's conversation really is a personal transformation on what happens when what you've done is no longer working, and then figuring out how you're tapping into what's not working, which really is sort of a message that's coming through the voice that's talking inside of you, the voice that's inside of your head that is telling you to do something really different. And how do you allow that spirituality or that intuition or that energy to come? And then you look at what you're doing right now, and there's a mismatch. And how do we reconcile all of that? So, this show specifically today is for everybody who's felt in the last couple of months that there's a lot of changes in the way you show up and what you believe in and what's important to you. And you have an increasing sense of a purpose coming through. You're looking for what's next in your life and figuring out where to go. So I'm going to give you some pillars around this so we can talk about what's really happening. So spiritual energy is, in the context of business, often looked as an opposite, as a paradox. So spiritual energy is considered woo-woo, whereas business is strategy, and strategy is logical, and it is crisp and concise and has tactics, and it's all that stuff that makes things like fall into place on a bullet point list from 1 to 10. Now, the purpose of us really working with the show and renaming it to include spirituality, which we've really always have done, comes from this idea that it actually is not contrary, that the spirituality is a connection to your purpose, something that sits deep inside of you, that's wanting to come out, the message you're here to share, and then you figuring out the strategic elements of it on how to make it happen. Otherwise, you might be a bohemian, you might be an artist, you might enjoy being broke. I don't. And we want to talk about how we let the spirituality, the intuition, your sense of purpose and belonging and sharing come out, while at the same time you have the strategy to make your business successful. I mean, how can that possibly be counteractive? So for me, it's something that shows up in my own life, right? So when I talk to somebody, and it happens literally in every single conversation, I have this strong sensation that there's an energy coming from above, and I get a spiral swirling sensation, mostly on the right side, sort of the back of my head and neck. And then suddenly I feel like I'm in the flow of things and stuff comes out of my mouth and I'm seeing things and it's very clear to me. Oftentimes, my clients or people that I talk to say, "Where'd that come from?" Well, it is because I listen and I'm connected to that source. And my job's always been to pull the puzzle pieces out of my clients' heads and then to reassemble them and help them to make that make sense and then build the business plan around it. It's really super, very simple. So the foundation of spiritual energy is your connection to tying this into what is actually happening. And this is where so much of what we do gets completely screwed up. And I'm going to give you a super personal example, and I'm going to be vulnerable here. I am hitting 60. When I say that number, I'm going like, WTF, that in itself is nuts. I'm a grandparent. So I have a 31-year-old daughter who is probably as old as many of you, and I have a 1-year-old granddaughter. So there's a choice I need to make now, because I realized that when I was a mom, I was single, I was stressed out, and I had to work really hard. So a lot of the juiciness and the sweetness of these moments were lost because my daughter had to go to daycare. I worked until 2 days before I had her, and I was back 6 weeks later. And somehow that was badge of honor back in those days. Not so much today anymore, thank God. But back then, that's what everybody did. And now I'm looking at my grandchild and I see all these sweet moments that she's experiencing, and I get to live vicariously through these small moments all over again. So the decision that I had to make is, am I going to try to be younger, right? Am I going to try to be looking like in my 40s with heavy touching? I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody likes a good filter, but can I actually pull this off anymore? And do I want to pull this off? And then I look at people that are around and I'm going like, man, nobody really pulls that off very elegantly. It is all about being elegant, and it's all about being in this moment of honesty to say, this is who I am. But then somebody my age is being looked at as a feminist, might be poorly aging. And believe me, I've heard every term on the planet that they call women that are of a certain age. And it's really, speaking, not very polite. So I thought about, like, how could I create a brand? And this is really relevant to what you are going through right now, because you always have to figure out what makes you uniquely you. And then how can you turn that into a brand? And so I came up with this idea of the badass grandma. And grandma in the sense of that I am perpetually afraid of running out of time to learn things. And I want to have enough time in my life now that I can spend the time with my granddaughter and with my daughter and support her, which I never had, because that's really important to me. And then I thought about, what makes me different and what makes me unique? I'm a multimillionaire. I did build and sell a business. I have tens of thousands of people that have taken my programs that have built businesses. I sure know what I'm talking about. What I don't have is youth, but what I do have is experience. So in the brand that I decided to refresh or update or go out with now, it is about, what do I actually know? And what I do know is spirituality and strategy go hand in hand. And my job is now to make this part of where I am at look good, because otherwise everybody's screwed, and share what I did to get to this point in the shortest possible way with all the shortcuts. Because if I have 15 minutes, I want to FaceTime my grandchild versus being on a call after a LinkedIn outreach from a VA somewhere in God knows where, who's randomly throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to find where the synchronicities are or the partnership opportunities. I'm not 15 minutes of my time with someone who's on a fishing expedition to figure out from me what they can sell me on. Do you know how ridiculous that is? If I have these 15 minutes, I want to spend them with my granddaughter, because that makes me feel a lot better. So this idea of the badass grandma, and do tell me on what do you feel about this brand? I mean, I'm still the growth architect, and I encourage you to look at some of these things that you might be nervous about to bringing out, especially if you're making changes, going from a corporate career into business ownerships, and you really want to figure out, how can I add spirituality to my business, and can I use spirituality to be more successful in business? Where are you actually in this? Where is the honesty of the conversation you are actually having? Because that, to me, where I am at, is the critical key, because it's not just about chasing. It is about attracting and allowing things to come to you. And that is a spiritual principle. The spiritual principle is take away what's not mine so what is mine can come in. So if you're constantly pushing for what you think is yours to come in, but you don't step back and allow it to come, you're essentially just pushing it away. So then I thought about how does this really affect decision making and leadership? And the decision making and leadership is based upon, if I look at the science of nature, and you may have heard me say this before, but if a large tree, knows how to move the roots aside for a seedling to come through, who the heck are we to think that we got this all figured out? We know nothing. If there's intelligence in plant life and the way things are connected underground, then, and that's a plant without a brain, but with an innate intelligence. Imagine what happens when you tap into that. That is why I think that spirituality is so important in my life right now. That's why I have this connection with my grandchild, because I am completely connected with her. And when she was born, I had this whole moment where I really drew down all the energy and I sent it through my daughter's head all the way through the birth canal to get this baby out, because it took hours for her to show up. And there was a moment where it was a little iffy. And I really stood there, planted with both of my feet in the corner of the room with my arms out. And I was calling upon all my ancestors and my grandmother and my father. And I said, we need to get this baby Kaliana out. We need to push her out. And 5 minutes later, she was out. So this is where I really encourage you to take a look into, what do you really believe in and what is meaningful to you? And are you fighting for what is rightfully yours? Or do you have a reasonable expectation and a belief system, a true belief system that what is rightfully yours is right here? And all you really have to do is take the actions and then expect that it's coming to you. Now, there has to be an action. Without the action, it's just a dream. But you do still have to do things. You still have to, do the work, listen to podcasts, do your self-improvement, and apply for these opportunities. Go out, search, pick up the phone, make the phone calls, have connections with other people, network, get in front of people, because otherwise nothing can come to you. You have to create these opportunities for things to come to you as well. So let's talk about implementing spiritual practices in business. So I'm not saying that you need to be running around your office chanting 24/7. But what I'm saying is that this expectation of, when you work with clients on a much more spiritual connection, is that you believe that you're attracting the right people that are really good clients for you, that are resonating on an energetic vibration right there where you are, and that you genuinely can help them, and that they're glad that you're here to help them. So there is no friction. It's about removing friction. It's about removing these contradictory points. It's about getting into that flow. And you can get into this particular mindset through meditation, through yoga, through practice, through walking, hiking, biking, anything that gets you in sort of that Zen mode. A lot of people listen to music, brings them to a particular state. Some people are dancing. So those all could be your spiritual practice, as long as you do this consistently and you make an effort and commitment to being in this particular kind of vibration all the time. The strategic benefits of spirituality in business are that suddenly opportunities come to you that you didn't think would happen. That's right after everything fell apart. Because when you go into spirituality, the stuff that you were trying to hold together that wasn't really ever yours is going to break. Now, when you step into these principles, I learned this after my spiritual journey. Man, I mean, everything fell apart. For 6 months, I was like, what the heck is going on here? And it's now 6 months later that things are starting to come out of the woodworks and people offering me opportunities. I was on a television program in Atlanta, and I had been really trying to get back on that show for a long time. And I couldn't get through to anybody. And out of the blue, 2 days ago, they reached out and says, we urgently need to have you on the show. Here's the dates that we have available. Can you please book one? I didn't have to do anything. They remembered me. So that's what happens when you step into these spiritual energies. And what happens is that you are no longer pushing these concepts as in hustle, leaning in harder. We know that people don't want to lean in harder. We know that people want to lean out more. We know that people want to have a life now. So this idea again of the badass grandma for me in my brand, where I am in my personal evolution, which is why we're having this conversation. Because I believe if you're listening to this episode, by default of what I believe in, you must be undergoing a personal evolution as well. And you need to hear exactly what we're talking about today. So you want to lean into these words that are coming from within you, that are in the back of your head, that are in your dreams, that are coming through because you're being called to do something. And instead of going down the road of what everybody else tells you, and please do not turn on your television, certainly not the news, where it's all this negativity and this force that we are seeing right now that is designed to just keep you in the space of insecurity and anger all the time. You want to ignore all of this and focus on, again, these questions. And I've said this in a previous episode. You always ask yourself 3 questions. Is it possible? Is somebody doing it? If yes, is it possible for me? If, of course, it's possible for you, if it's possible for someone else. And the question is never can I, but how can I? And that's how you get your brain thinking in those right spiritual concepts into that right connection. So again, I want to sum this up and I want to keep this episode short for you today. But the idea of spirituality and strategy is the spirituality is the knowing that this is here for you, that this is here for you in the exact way that it needs to show up for you to live that moment in purpose that you set out to do. If you have no dreams and no desire, and if you are a pencil pusher and whatever, this is not for you. But if you're sitting here and you go like, man, wouldn't it be amazing if, then this is you, because the dream is already here. It's already asking you to step into it. So will you do that, please? Lean into the dream and out of the hustle, but do the actions that it takes for you to set things into motion so that the magic can happen. And do not give up before the magic can happen. That's it for me for today. Pretty all straightforward. I look forward to seeing you again on the next show. And thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode. I do really am asking you this time, though, on a personal note, with this badass grandma idea, how that's resonating with you. If you think it's funny, if it's stupid, if it's just a weird idea, or if it made you think about, well, if there was somebody who's actually living the life that you are designing right now. So if I'm 60 and you're 30, you have 30 years to get here. Would you want to be a multimillionaire? Would you want to have the time to take off whenever you want to? Would you want to be able to buy a car and not really look at the receipts and invoices? Would you like to be a property owner? Would you like to have all these things? Would you like to learn from somebody like that so that you don't wait 30 years, but that you have a plan for the next 30 years to get here? And that's it for me for today. Thank you so much again. I'll see you next time, and goodbye. So appreciate you being here. Thank you so much for listening to the entire episode. Please subscribe to the podcast, give us a 5-star review, a comment, and share this episode with one more person so that you can help us help more people. Thank you again. Until next time. Goodbye.